Welcome to the week in YouTube finance.
We had some major breaking news released just minutes ago. The United States economy just posted its worst GDP number in over 3 years since the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. For the first time in years, the United States economy contracted, not grew during the first quarter of 2025. According to statistics released by the United States Commerce Department literally minutes ago, in the first quarter of 2025, the United States economy contracted by about 0.3%. Now, economists had predicted that and projected that the economy would shrink about 0.2%, so this is worse than expectations. But it shows that the economy is reacting significantly negatively toward Donald Trump's ongoing trade wars, towards the administration's ongoing economic policies. And for the first time in 3 years, the economy is shrinking, not growing. This is a major recession indicator. Alarm bells are going off on Capitol Hill right now and in Wall Street. So we'll see what the day brings us. But folks, bad news right now for the United States economy. Now, a lot of folks have asked, well, how can you support my work? Right now, I'm actually going on Capitol Hill to potentially meet with members of Congress.
Everyone is freaking out about tariffs, especially the car industry. But with all these proclamations and exemptions and walkbacks and numbers flying around, who can keep up? We're gonna get to the bottom of the on, then delayed, then on, then delayed, then adjusted, then expanded, then delayed tariff whirlwind we've all been caught up in, and find out what the hell is going on and what it means for you. This is a Donut News Network special report. I'm Nolan Sykes. Now, before we can get to the cars, let's look at how tariffs actually work. Tariffs, in plain terms, are an additional tax on imports. But who is actually paying them, and how does that affect you? Let's use an example. You live in the US and you're in the market for a new car. You do some research and settle on a $30,000 Subaru BRZ. There's a 25% tariff on imported cars, and the BRZ just so happens to be built in Japan. Whoever imports the car, whether it's the manufacturer or your local car dealer, has to pay a 25% tariff on the car's value, which goes to the US Treasury to release it into the country. In our example, that's an extra $7,500 just to get it on the showroom floor. Too bad for the importer, right? Chances are that some, if not all of that extra cost is going to be passed on to someone else. That somebody is you, Aiden, and that sad boy banner you put on the rear window is probably going to be hit with another tariff too. Most of the time, it's the consumer of the imported goods who bears the burden of these additional costs in order for the importers to still be able to turn a profit. That's business. And this example is a straightforward version of how tariffs work. In reality, it's actually a lot more complicated than that. Take a car like the Toyota Camry, aka the best-selling car in the US for 23 years. It's assembled here in the US, but less than half the parts are actually manufactured here. The rest are either being made in Japan, Canada, or Mexico. Well, that's not too bad, right? At least half the parts are made here. How expensive could the other half of the parts actually be? Well, if tariffs are involved, really expensive. Every part that crosses the border will also be hit with a tariff if the US has levied one against its country of origin. And in many cases, these parts are crossing more than one border, and sometimes crossing them multiple times. All these import fees and tariffs compound and compound and compound until you have a massive tariff sandwich. That's way too much tariff, and the American consumer is gonna have to eat that big ass sandwich whether they ordered it or not.
Oh my God, feel the energy? Click the link below.
So now that you know who is footing the bill when it comes to tariffs, how did we end up with this sandwich to begin with? At the time of this recording, April 16th, 2025, there's been talks of tariffs since March of 2018, but things got really cooking in February of this year. In February, President Trump imposed a 25% tariff via executive order on all imports coming from Mexico and Canada. The White House said this was in the interest of national security due to illegal immigration and rampant drug trafficking. 2 days later, the president put a 30-day pause on the tariffs after Mexico and Canada promised to strengthen their efforts at the borders. 10 days after that, the president directed his staff to develop reciprocal tariffs to counter trade barriers from other countries. Along comes March 4th. The 30-day tariff ceasefire with Mexico, Canada, and China ended, and the president's original 25% tariff on most goods from our neighbors went into effect, along with a 10% increase on the already existing 10% tariff against Chinese imports. This is the moment got expensive. new reciprocal tariffs start flying, including 50% on Canadian steel and aluminum. Tariffs and the threat of even more tariffs are getting thrown around more than a football in a Dude Perfect video. All this hoopla culminated on March 26 when the president signed a proclamation set to go into effect on April 2nd, which would impose a 25% tariff on all imported vehicles and auto parts. And that's when got real for car nerds. Not only did the proclamation go into effect, but we tacked on an additional 10% universal tariff on all imports with additional reciprocal tariffs in the following days. Here's some footage of what the scene at a local dealership looked like that day.
Things are looking pretty bad out here.
But on April 9th, the president placed a 90-day pause on the reciprocal tariffs we just talked about, with the exception of a massive 145% tariff on China, meaning anything coming from China could cost more than double. On April 13th, US consumers began seeing tariff surcharges on receipts as companies began to pass on the burden of these additional costs to you and I. Over the next few days, the markets plunged, rebounded, then plunged again, then maybe rebounded, as we saw the highest levels of volatility since a pandemic or that time I was in that polycule. Cue to April 14th, where the president floated the possibility of exemptions to tariffs on auto parts, stating, quote, "I'm looking at something to help car companies with it. They're switching to parts that were made in Canada, Mexico, and other places, and they need a little bit of time because they're going to make them here." This was actually backed up by Nissan, who said on April 15th that they were considering shifting production of their vehicles from Canada, Mexico, and Japan, which is the idea behind the tariffs. Make things too expensive to import, incentivize manufacturing to move to the US, and create new jobs for American workers. At the end of the day, though, none of this is likely to play out in a straightforward way, just like my polycule. And I'm not gonna sit here and tell you guys I know exactly what's gonna happen, just like my polycule. But if things keep going the way they are, here's what might happen. First up, supply chain issues. Remember when that big, beautiful boat got stuck in the Suez Canal and nobody could get their IKEA bookcases and coconut milk? It's this, but with everything. You know the supply chain. You love the supply chain. It's the entire system involved in producing and delivering consumer goods, from raw materials to manufacturing to the logistics of getting things into places, and of course, for handling returns and repairs of anything else. But how does that impact cars? Some of the major raw materials used in automotive manufacturing are steel, aluminum, plastic, and rubber. Right now, 40 to 50% of these raw materials come from outside the US. Then we get into parts manufacturing. A typical car is made up of around 30,000 individual parts. And while some are made in the US by local suppliers, a whole bunch of them come from other countries. And by a whole bunch, I mean that last year, 42% of parts for cars sold here came from Mexico and 10% from Canada. Now, this doesn't mean that the remaining 48% is American made, though. In recent years, GM's vehicles have averaged around 41% US Canadian content, Ford's have averaged 30% US Canadian, and Chrysler averaged an astonishing 23%, which is lower than foreign automakers like Honda and Volkswagen, who have factories here in the US. Sidebar. You'll notice I said US/Canadian instead of just US, and that's because we could not find any information on what percentage of that percentage is American. And this just goes to show how intertwined we are with our neighbors. Anyway, let's move on to automotive assembly plants, where they combine parts into larger systems like the engine, transmission, interior, chassis, and actual body of the car. You might know this already, but a lot of American companies assemble their cars abroad. For example, GM assembles 19% of its models in Mexico and 13% in South Korea. Ford assembles 13% of their models in Mexico and another 13% in Canada. According to the White House's website, of the 16 million vehicles Americans bought in 2024, half of those were imported. Of the remaining 8 million that were assembled in America, the average domestic content is, quote, conservatively estimated to be only 50% and is likely closer to 40%. What does this mean? Well, if a car is assembled in the US with 50% US-Canada made parts, it has a US-built engine transmission, that's about as American as it currently gets. Shifting the supply chain to feature primarily US-based suppliers could lead to additional costs up and down that chain, especially if the domestic supply chain isn't established, which as of right now, it isn't. Even if these car companies do change up where they're sourcing materials and building their F-150s, it's gonna take a while before that happens. The average design cycle for a car, including everything from concept drawings to figuring out where the sun visors are gonna be made, takes close to a decade. Building new factories or significantly retrofitting existing ones would mean substantial investments in land, construction, machinery, and technology, which could take years. And guess what? Businesses are going to want to recoup that investment as well. Which brings us to the major point we've been building to here. All cars are going to get more expensive. It won't surprise you to learn that new cars are going to cost a whole lot more, like $5,000 to $10,000 more for basic models, and in some cases upwards of $20,000 for luxury vehicles. Higher production costs often lead to automakers reducing production to cut losses, which could lead to vehicle shortages and less promotional pricing. Some analysts are projecting that the tariffs will add billions with a B in cost to the auto industry, which will most likely be passed on to consumers. Now, if you're thinking, Nolan, I own my car already. I'm not buying a Mitsubishi Eclipse Cross. I'm gonna be fine and safe and happy. Well, maybe. If I know you, and I'm pretty sure I do, Tyler, you've been creeping around Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace looking for a sweet deal on a second-gen 12-valve Cummins. I've got bad news for you. Used car prices won't be spared by the tariff fallout either. If new cars cost more, demand for used cars will rise. That's what we call supply and demand. And if you think Donut talking about a car increases prices, just wait till you see what these tariffs are gonna do to those sweet JDM imports. Just ask Jimmy.
Why?
You might be saying, Nolan, I don't care. I'm not buying another car. And that's great. I really do admire your restraint. But it's not just cars going up in price. Those individual parts from other countries we mentioned, the ones that not only help you build the car, but the parts that keep it on the road, yeah, tariffs affect those too. Prices on auto parts are already skyrocketing, up 10 or even 30% depending on the country of origin. If they're coming from China,
Oh, forget about it.
imagine how expensive Rock Auto is going to be if these tariffs stick. Those magnets alone are going to cost an arm and a leg. We actually have a package on the way right now with a $2,500 counterfeit car part for a future video that now has a tariff of $3,625, which means this counterfeit part now costs $6,125, which is more than the real thing. And there's nothing we can do about it because it's on a boat in the middle of the ocean and Jimmy has to go out to sea to get it.
It be the parts or you walk the plank.
This ultimately means that many enthusiasts might have to hold off on their builds or use cheaper parts that may not have the same quality. The car community is already hard enough to get into if you're not dripping in diamonds. And with all these changes, the barrier of entry could get even higher for some people. It's gonna cost a lot more to have fun with cars. So where does this leave us? The big boys aren't gonna be the ones who could lose everything. There could be a major hit to your local mechanic and smaller automotive businesses as they struggle to pay these massive price hikes up front. I mean, how many aftermarket companies out there based in the US are gonna be affected by this in a huge way? I think a ton of them. The situation might lead to cash flow challenges, delayed payments, and reduced inventory, which will ultimately force some businesses to scale back their operations, meaning it'll take longer to get your fixed if you need it. Small suppliers lack the financial resilience of larger corporations, which may have long-standing impact on the amount of small businesses in the automotive sector altogether. While there have been discussions about potential exemptions or pauses in the tariffs to allow car makers time to adjust their supply chains, the lack of consistent policy direction has made it difficult for small businesses in particular to plan effectively. You know, I was just talking to a small business owner who you might know very well, and he said it's impossible to make any long-term plans right now because the market is so unpredictable, and that's just one anecdote. All right, interrupting myself for a major update we got this morning right before we were gonna publish this video. We got a big update. Apparently the White House is going to give automakers a little bit of relief on these tariffs. Quote, this change will allow any domestic automaker to apply for and receive a, quote, import adjustment or break worth up to 3.75% of the total value of its fleet of vehicles that were assembled in the US, and then that break goes down to 2.5% the next year. And we don't know for sure if that 3.75% will be passed on to you, the customer, and we also don't know if there will be another change in the near future, but that's how this news story has gone. So in the meantime, back to me. Thank you guys so much for watching. This is a very dense and complex topic, and I hope we did a good job of explaining, at least giving you a little foundation to understand what we're going through right now. If you're a small business owner, I hope you guys are figuring it out. I hope you're doing all right, seriously, sincerely. If you want to see our video on Nissan and Honda, we did a similar video to this one, like a news breakdown of what was going on with them. And maybe check out this video on go-karts. That's a pretty cheap way to have fun with cars. Go check that out. We'll see you next time. Bye.
The next 100 days will be crucial for the success of President Trump. Hello, I'm Steve Forbes, and this is What's Ahead, where you get the insights you need to better navigate these turbulent times. The media has been full of stories about President Trump's first 100 days, a tradition that goes back to Franklin Roosevelt and the kickoff of the New Deal in 1933 to fight the Great Depression. But for this commander-in-chief, it'll be the second 100 days that will define his presidency. The issues are daunting. Domestically, of course, the two big things are tariffs and taxes. The first quarter saw a heartening advance in business investment, but some companies are turning cautious because they need to know what conditions they'll be operating under. Consumers are also becoming cautious. Tariffs will initially raise prices, both because they are taxes and also because they are indeed disruptive to supply chains, which, as we saw with the pandemic, can also make countless items more costly or even in short supply. All of this makes it even more imperative to get a truly big, beautiful tax cut enacted as soon as possible. But given the turbulent economic circumstances, Republicans and President Trump must quickly grasp that a far bigger tax cut is needed than what they're considering now. Personal income tax rates must be whacked. Right now, Republicans are toying with raising the cap on deductions for state and local taxes from $10,000 to $50,000. It would be far more constructive and impactful to slash the 22% and 24% income tax brackets to 15%. In fact, even better would be eliminating them altogether, taking both down to 12%. In the same vein, cut the 32%, 35%, and 37% brackets to 30%. The GOP must also include the stimulus of knocking down the capital gains tax to 15%, which would also instantly raise more revenue. These reductions would really sizzle the economy. Here, self-described deficit hawks come across as bird brains. When they squawk, the tax cuts would increase the budget deficit. Without a booming economy, we'll never get out of the fiscal mess we're in today. The most ominous challenges the Trump administration faces is on foreign policy. It's great to have a minerals deal with Ukraine, but the only way to get a durable peace is to immediately provide Ukraine with a flood of needed weapons to halt and then throw back Putin's upcoming spring offensives. Tougher sanctions won't do it. Putin is building up military forces on Russia's border with NATO countries like Finland. President Trump must recognize that Putin's imperial ambitions still burn within him. Negotiating with Iran on its nuclear weapons program is a profound mistake. The mullahs have no intention of forsaking their goal of Iran becoming a nuclear power, whatever agreement, if any, they might sign. The administration must credibly counter China's own imperial ambitions, whatever deal is made on tariffs. China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea think the U.S. is in terminal decline, and the current turmoil confirms their belief. That's one way how tragic miscalculations are made. Given current conditions, the White House must be ready for a surprise crisis that can unintentionally escalate. One such situation is the aftermath of the deadly terrorist attack against Indian tourists in Kashmir, which is controlled by India but claimed by Pakistan. Both countries are nuclear powers. The danger is that a vigorous military response by India could escalate into a wider war, as Pakistan is allied with China. The next 100 days are indeed critical for President Trump and for us and the world. I'm Steve Forbes. Thanks for listening. Do send in your comments and suggestions. I look forward to being with you soon again.
Today on Forbes, the top 10 richest people in the world, May 2025. 7 of the world's 10 wealthiest billionaires are starting off May with fatter fortunes than a month ago. Our top 10 richest people on Earth list is as of May 1st, 2025 at 12 a.m. Eastern Time. As a reminder, stock prices fluctuate routinely, so the net worths on our list may change on a daily basis. Forbes tracks the daily changes on our real-time list of billionaires. Forbes has been keeping track of the world's billionaires since 1987. In April 2025, we found 3,028 of them for our annual list. Of the top 10 richest in the world, the biggest gainer over the past month is Elon Musk, the world's number 1 richest. Shares of Tesla, one of his most valuable assets, recovered from a plunge early in April to end the month up about 7%. That contributed to a $46 billion increase in Musk's fortune in the past month, landing him at $386.5 billion, per Forbes' estimates. The rise in fortunes of those at the top of the billionaires ranking came as the Nasdaq climbed 0.7% in the past month, while the S&P 500 fell 1.1%. Stocks have been volatile in response to news about President Trump's tariff plans, reports about adjustments to the tariffs, and concerns about a possible recession. Business leaders across the country are pausing new ventures and investments amid the uncertainty. The second biggest top 10 gainer for the month was Spain's Amancio Ortega, founder of fashion firm Inditex, best known for its Zara chain. Ortega, ranked number 9, is nearly $9 billion wealthier than at the beginning of April. That's thanks to a 2% increase in the price of Inditex shares, combined with about a 5% strengthening of the euro against the dollar during the month of April, which put his fortune at an estimated $123.3 billion. Luxury goods tycoon Bernard Arnault of France did not fare as well, despite the stronger euro. In mid-April, LVMH, the luxury conglomerate he leads, posted first-quarter revenue that fell short of analyst expectations. The group's sales in the US fell 3%, led by a decline at cosmetics chain Sephora, while in Asia, excluding Japan, sales tumbled 11%. That drove LVMH shares down more than 15% for the month, shaving nearly $15 billion off Arnault's fortune. He did manage to keep his number 6 rank among the world's richest. The 2 others in the top 10 whose fortunes fell, number 2 Jeff Bezos, down $5.3 billion to $201.6 billion, and number 3, Mark Zuckerberg, down $9.3 billion to $190 billion. As a group, the top 10 kick off this month worth $1.77 trillion, up $40 billion compared to April 1st. After Musk, Bezos, and Zuckerberg, at number 4 is Larry Ellison, the co-founder of software firm Oracle, with a net worth of $176.9 billion. Ellison's fortune rose by $1.9 billion in the past month, as shares of Oracle ticked up. At number 5 this month is Warren Buffett, with a net worth of $166.4 billion. Buffett's fortune inched up by $500 million in the past month, a rounding error for someone worth more than $160 billion. His rank remains unchanged from April at number 5. At number 6 is Bernard Arnault, with a net worth of $146.5 billion. At number 7 and 8 are Google co-founders Larry Page and Sergey Brin, respectively. Page's fortune grew by $3.4 billion during April as Alphabet shares climbed, leaving him with a net worth of $132.7 billion to start the month of May. Like Page, Brin's fortune also expanded in the past month, up $3.3 billion to $127.2 billion. At number 9 is Amancio Ortega, and at number 10 is Steve Ballmer, the former CEO of Microsoft and the owner of the LA Clippers. A 4% jump in Microsoft shares in the past month pushed up Ballmer's fortune by $4.4 billion, per Forbes' estimates, to $114.1 billion. For full coverage, check out the Forbes Wealth Team's piece on Forbes.com. This is Kieran Meadows from Forbes. Thanks for tuning in.